Welcome to Epic Begins with One Step Forward, the podcast that reveals how to plan, achieve, and enjoy the journey of creating epic results in your life, business, health, and relationships. Here's your host, best-selling author and motivational speaker, Zander Sprague.
Hello, Epic people, and welcome back to another exciting episode of Epic Begins with One Step Forward. I'm your host, Zander Sprague, and today I am joined by Jeaneen Tang. Jeaneen, tell us who you are and what you do.
Thank you for having me. I am Jeaneen Tang. I'm a speech language pathologist. I've been doing speech therapy for over 23 years, and I have a 13-year-old son. No, 13, I'm 12. I keep thinking he's a teenager already. He just turned 12. He's a tween, a true tween. And unfortunately, when he was 13 months old, he had a fall from our bed and became a disabled child. He had a brain injury and he had a stroke a few days later. He doesn't use his right arm or hand. And, he's such a wonderful kid, though. And I think it's added so much to my life as a parent and also as a therapist, because now, before I had him, I was a therapist without a child, and I had one point of view of how therapy should be done, how kids should be raised. And then after I had my son, before his accident, I was like a parent, and I could understand all of the turmoil that parents go through, all the struggles and all the tiredness. And then after he became disabled, I can now have a 360 view of being a parent and also a therapist and a parent of a disabled child. And I can have greater empathy. And, I just want to create a greater impact in the world and teach people, the strategies that they could do every day and hopefully change the landscape of children that need speech therapy in the future.
Definitely. And so what are clearly you're on this epic journey with your son and with the work that you're doing. What do you think are some of the important things for parents or people who have children that may need some speech therapy, language development?
Yeah, absolutely. There are so many kids these days that need early intervention speech therapy. So that's between 0 and 3 years old. And a lot of parents, they are hopeful that their child will start speaking. And so I would really encourage parents to, if you do feel there's any kind of delay, or if you're a pediatrician or anybody mentions, hey, they might need your child might need speech therapy, don't be afraid to reach out to an educator, your local agency that has early intervention, because the waiting part and holding off on therapy is what's going to hurt the child in the end, because you don't want to prolong the delay. You want to address it as soon as possible. So if there's anything that you can do, is get help right away. And don't feel that you're a bad parent because your child is not speaking, or that it's because you're not doing something correctly, or your ego is in the way of helping your child, because, you are not a specialist, but you can learn things from a specialist like myself. And, you weren't, you're not trained in that special strategy, but you can learn it easily by learning it from someone like myself or getting additional training and stuff. So it's not anything that you were innately born to do. You weren't innately born to teach your child how to speak and develop naturally. Some people have this intuitive way, right, of working with kids, but most people aren't. And especially if it's your first child, it's like there's no harm in getting help. And I think that taking away your ego, that ego part of like, oh, I can do it better than anybody else because that's my child, I think that gets in the way of getting the help. So don't be afraid of getting help.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are things I'll speak personally on this. I have two daughters. My older daughter was born with a partial unilateral hearing loss, and you'd never know. She doesn't, but she did have um, early early intervention speech therapy. They came in and the speech therapist said, "You don't need me. I mean, there's not there's she's doing great. The speech is good." Then my younger daughter had just really bad ear infections, and we weren't really aware of how backed up her ears were. However, um, since we'd done ear tubes with my older daughter, we're like, okay, let's make sure. And we obviously were all plugged into audiology and stuff because of my older daughter. And my younger daughter wasn't really crawling so much. She was doing sort of the sit and scoot and stuff, and we couldn't figure out why. So we brought her in. They're like, oh, yeah, she's got a lot of fluid behind her eardrums. We have to do tubes. So we did tubes. And honestly, Jeaneen, within 2 days of her having that operation, the advance, she started to crawl on her hands and knees. There was some language. I don't want to say language delay because it wasn't, but we figured out that her ears were all stopped up, so there were certain sounds that she initially couldn't, like, she didn't know because she couldn't hear them.
Exactly.
And so she had some speech therapy. So yes, you're exactly right. Take your ego out of it. We don't have any problem in other parts of our life. Like if you need to change the oil on your car, you could do it, but we tend to go to, Jiffy Lube or Speedy Oil Change, not because we can't do it, but they know what they're doing and it happens a lot faster.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And the same is true with our children. There are experts who can help you and probably do it a lot better and a lot faster than you can.
Yeah, absolutely. And they can train you better, right?
Yeah.
They can give you those not easy fixes, but that toolbox that you can utilize in your home and in the community and carry over those therapy strategies that they're doing in the sessions.
Yeah. And that is actually really, I think, an important part, which is as a parent, you're part of this team. It's great that you're reaching out, your child is getting therapy, but you spend a heck of a lot more time with your child. So you do need to know those tools and you need to help reinforce those tools with your children so that they do advance. Because like anything, if I only do something 1 hour a week, my progress is going to be really slow.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. It's interesting how your younger daughter, the physical aspect was also impacted by the ears. But if you think about it, our balance, right? Because we have those in the inner ear, we have those canals that go and determine our balance. So if we have vertigo or not, or if we know where we are in space. So that's interesting that her physical aspect improved so much more.
Absolutely.
By just sticking those eustachian tubes in.
Absolutely. And again, things that you realize afterwards that seem so very obvious. And one of them was the reason that she wasn't crawling on her hands and knees is it was making her dizzy.
Wow.
She didn't say that she was only one or just before her first birthday. But there were milestones that we were aware she wasn't quite hitting. And obviously, we are all dynamic human beings. Some children start to learn to walk at 7 months. Some it's a year, and if it's longer, there are certain. Your pediatrician will tell you certain windows that if we haven't hit that milestone, we need to look at it. But just because your neighbor's friend, your brother or sister's child does something before your child doesn't mean that they're delayed. It just means everyone's on their own schedule, right?
Yes.
But yeah, with my younger daughter, we look back, we did talk to the doctors, and they sort of said, yeah, we would hypothesize that the reason that she was, not crawling was because when she tried to do it, it threw her off, and makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. And the hearing loss is probably worse with that fluid in her ears than your other daughter. Because
Absolutely. Yeah.
your
Yeah. I
other
mean,
daughter
both,
could hear in one ear at least, right? And your younger daughter couldn't hear in both ears, and everything was so muddled, and that high frequency, like the S's and all those other sounds, are just completely lost.
yeah. And there were initially there were some sounds that she had a hard time making because she hadn't heard them
Mhm.
and stuff. So that's interesting. Now I see over your shoulder that you've written a book.
I have.
Can you tell me, Play Dumb and Sabotage does not sound like a great, as a parent, I'm like, what? But tell me
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, my mom was very much against the play dumb and sabotage. She's like, it should be like play ignorant and I'm not sure what else. I'm like, no, mom, it's play dumb and sabotage. It's a term I've used for, many over 20 years as a speech therapist because, we over anticipate either as a parent or caregiver or as educators, we over anticipate what a child might need or
Mm-hmm.
want. And so we kind of, a great example is the new parent who wants to make sure their child is dry and fed and warm and has all these toys and that they're never crying. And they're just like, I'm a great parent because I know what my child needs and wants. And so the child doesn't have to actually communicate or indicate that there's a need or want because they're being tended to. And why have to communicate when everything's just going to happen?
Right.
So
Or just go, eh.
yeah, yeah, and then a mother or a father, whatever, they know what that. Oh, they want this and that, or they want this. They know what each little
Mhm.
is. And so they are like, before the child even has to do anything else, the parent is providing that for the child.
Yeah.
So, and also like kids love to play, love when they are smarter than us. Kids love
Hmm.
to be smarter. So when kids are a little bit older and, I might be looking at a picture book and they're not really so engaged, but I want them to have some more play and interaction. I might point to a dog and be like, oh, does a dog say baba?
Hmm.
And usually they're like, what? No,
Hmm.
no, no. Or I might, say, oh, this is a pencil. Am I going to eat it? Or
Hmm.
this is a doll. Am I going to wear it? Do something that's absurd and play dumb because then it kind of gets them to interact a little bit more.
Definitely.
Yeah, and the sabotage part is just creating opportunities to practice these language things because, just like in a sport, if you're doing basketball and you're doing free throws, you're not just going to shoot a free throw every now and then, you're going to practice them so you get good at them. So like sabotage at snack time is super simple. Usually at snack time, a parent might give a child a whole bowl of goldfish, right? Because that's what the child wants. They want the goldfish. Here's a whole bowl. But a great way to sabotage is giving them just a couple pieces of goldfish, but having the bowl in sight but out of reach. So the
Hmm.
child, even if they go, you can model for them, oh, do you want more? You can do a
Right.
simple sign or a simple word, and hopefully that child learns to imitate and progress from there. So you give them a couple more goldfish and just have more of that back and forth opportunity. Another
Absolutely.
another thing could be like having a favorite toy in sight but out of reach, so they need to indicate that they want it.
Using the
Uh,
words. Use
yeah,
your word.
using your words. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I can say, um, I would love to say that I wasn't like that first parent that was like, oh, here's what you want. But I did learn as a parent that yes, um, I know you have the words,
Yeah.
even when it's taking time, right? Because as you said, sometimes it is a battle of will. I will
Yeah.
just say until I get what I want, and you as a parent have to go, no, I know you have the words. You can tell me what you want.
Yep. You have to be more stubborn than they are.
Well, we are smarter than them. We
We're
really are.
smarter, but you have to be more stubborn.
Yeah.
You have to hold out and be like, nope. But there is a time, like when I'm rushing out of the house, I'm like, okay, we're grabbing these things and we're going, right?
Yeah.
But if there is a time where you can offer choices So like when I would get my son dressed in the morning, I'd be like, do you want the red shirt or the green shirt?
Right.
So he can see the vocabulary, he can hear the vocabulary. And even if he can't say it, he's looking at one of them. And I'm like, oh, the red shirt. I love red. Red is like the color of apples, so you can also expand on that vocabulary. And
Definitely.
then one thing I would tell parents, one of the chapters I have is don't ask a yes, no question unless you're willing to honor the no, right? Because so many times we ask kids, are you ready to work? Are you ready to clean up? Are you ready to have dinner? Are you ready to do your homework? And they'll say no or whatever. And we can't just be like, well, you're going to do it anyway, right? Because if they're saying no, then we need to honor that.
Definitely.
So one thing to get around that would be offering choices, right? So I might ask my son, okay, we're going to get ready for bed. Do you want to brush your teeth first or change it to pajamas first? Or one thing with him is like, okay, do you want to cut your nails? He'll be like, no. I'm like, okay, we're going to cut your nails. You want to do it tonight or tomorrow night? So he can make a choice, right?
Definitely. And I think choice is really important because as a mental health professional, I'm like, oh yes, choice is so important, especially children who feel like as they're getting older that they don't have control over what's going on. I certainly know things not to say. Don't ask your kid what they want for dinner. Give them a choice. Would you like chicken nuggets or macaroni and cheese? Now you've given them a choice. They can utilize their words to tell, but I'm not a short order cook. I'm not like, oh, whatever you want under the sun. Oh, one person wants chicken nuggets, another one wants mac and cheese, or says, I want pancakes. Okay.
Yeah. Or you can go down that rabbit hole. They'll be like, what do you want for dinner? Do you want a hot dog? No. Do you want pizza? No. Do you want a hamburger? No. Do you want, then you go down this rabbit hole thing. But if you give them choices, then they have two different things to pick from. And then hopefully they pick one of them and like one of them.
Right. Well, but even if you go, those are your choices. I'm, no, it's not what I'm sorry. Here's what's on offer for you. You're right. You're right. And I do think that when children are smaller, they're learning to talk. We do want to try and fulfill, and we do over anticipate, or we're like, oh, I know what you want. And some of that, honestly, is from a psychological standpoint, conditioned response to conditioned stimulus. When you have your baby and it comes home, it can't communicate other than crying. So you figure out what all of that means. So now you have let's say a whole 9 months to a year of trying to interpret what the sound means and what they want. Now they start to have language, and we have to break ourselves of, I no longer need to do this.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And what suggestions do you have for parents? Because again, you're like, I just spent a year taking care of this nonverbal child, listening to the sounds, trying to interpret what the cry meant,
Yeah, absolutely. So for those first 9 months when they don't have any real words, right? They're absorbing everything. They're maybe doing some visual tracking, auditory tracking. That's when you want to do vocal play with them. You want to get really close to them. You want to look at them in their face. You want to touch their face. You want them to touch your face, and have all this vocal sounds that they want to hopefully imitate, right? And then as they're getting to have some words or being able to even reach out to grab something, you want to start offering those choices so they can hear the vocabulary, see the vocabulary, and then provide simple expressive language about what that item is. So I was like, oh, do you want the rattle or the ball? And they reach for one of them. Oh, ball. It's round, and you can talk about it a little bit. So doing that kind of stuff. And then working up to, adding simple things like the snack, giving a little bit here and there, giving a little milk or a little juice at a time so that the child can indicate. So you want them to start to indicate whether it's through reaching or looking, and then slowly building that up to words and sounds and other things like that. and then up to sentences eventually. But mindfully under anticipating. So the subtitle of my book is Mindfully Under Anticipating the Child's Need and Create Opportunities to Practice Language. So, you've already learned to over anticipate because you're a great parent, but now you have to, it takes more work to mindfully under anticipate, knowing what they need and being like, okay, I'm going to not provide that right now because I want them to practice and interact with their environment. And it becomes more of a struggle on your part because you're like, okay, I have to hold back, but I know it's more helpful for the child.
I'm smiling because I'm like, oh, I so remember those feelings and stuff, and some of the, I'm I'm torturing my child. I'm not. The other thing to keep in mind, these beautiful, wonderful little beings are id based, meaning it's all about what they want right now. Believe it or not, they can actually wait. They are not going to expire without a full bowl of goldfish or a full sippy cup of juice or milk or water or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of kids these days, because the parents don't understand that the kids can wait or that they want to provide everything that the child might need in that moment, that the child doesn't learn to wait, doesn't learn that, doesn't learn patience and
Delayed gratification.
yeah, and then they get up, the child gets upset, and then the parents react right away and think that they need to, console or provide something right away, and then it becomes the cycle of behavior, right? Then the child is controlling the parent, and it becomes like, okay, now we need to intervene. And as a school, I work in a preschool with some kids, and as a school, then the school has to be like, no, this is what you need to be doing because this behavior in the school is not appropriate.
Right. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, my girlfriend does early intervention special ed,
Yeah.
and her population tends to, not exclusively, but tends to be on the spectrum. She's got 3-year-olds who are, and they've been diagnosed, and she's working with them, and all the stuff you're talking about, the language, she's super good at. Use your words. I don't understand. You use your word, or use a symbol of what it is that you want.
Yeah.
And she's very patient with she's like, oh yeah, squawked at me all day, was really upset. I know that they have the word. She's obviously working with whatever their limitations. There are the nonverbal. There are some of them that are at a much lower cognitive level than their actual biological age.
Yeah,
absolutely. But everyone has some skills.
absolutely.
And yeah, I mean that gratification. I don't know about you, but I certainly heard in the car, I'm so thirsty, and we're 5 minutes from home. I'm like, I'll get you water in 5 minutes. No, I need water. No, you're okay. You really are. I don't believe. I'm older. I can say I didn't have sippy cups and water bottles, and I mean we have the most well hydrated population in the world. I certainly wasn't being asked if I needed water. Good.
Oh, yeah, I know. They have like 5 different sippy cups or water bottles and all this stuff now. But going back to, the abilities of different kids, right? So every child has a different level of skill, right?
Definitely.
And, one of the chapters I have is like, no child's ever died of crying, at least as far as we know, right? So parents don't want kids to cry, and I understand that, right? I don't want to hear my child cry, but there is a difference between a child crying because they're hurt, or and there's a child crying because they're not getting something that they want.
Yes.
Right. And then there's the ability to communicate, and then there's ability not to communicate, and then there's this gray area, or this ability, this range that you can stretch, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you would never ask a child who cannot walk to run, right?
Sure.
So you would not ask a child who's nonverbal to speak in sentences, but you might ask them to babble or imitate a sign or imitate part of a word or something.
Or point to,
Yeah.
if you have PECs, which are
Yeah, picture exchange communication systems. Yeah,
exactly,
perfect.
you know, point to what you want. Oh, you want a goldfish. Okay.
Yeah,
And then they get the reward because they communicated.
yeah. So if you have a child who is able to do a certain skill, but they just don't want to do it, that's when you become, the educator or person or parent who is a little bit more stubborn than they are, because you know that they're able to do something. It's not because they're not able to do it. So there's that's the line where I think it's okay if a child cries.
Sure.
Like, one example is my niece, who's now going to be 21. I think she just turned 21. Oh my gosh, I'm so old. But when she was like 2, when she was 2.5, she could feed herself, right?
Sure.
But she wanted my brother to feed her. And it was like a peanut butter jelly sandwich. She cut it into these tiny little squares she could just pick up and feed herself. But she wanted him to feed her. And he was in a rush. He had to go to do some errands.
Mm-hmm.
And he was in a rush. I could tell that he needed to get out of the house. I'm like, I don't have to go anywhere. I'll stay with her. And he's like, okay. And he left. And I said, you're going to feed yourself. And she was like, no. And I was like, okay, go sit in the corner. And when I was like, when you're ready, you can come back.
Mm-hmm.
So after she was ready, she came back. I go, okay, feed yourself. And so we did this back and forth for a while. But eventually, I always say, this is the day I broke you. Because eventually she did come back and she did feed herself and she was completely fine. But that's one example of where she had the ability to do something. She just didn't want to do it.
Right.
Right. And so that's when I say it's okay for a child to cry, because if she just cries and gets her way, then she's going to cry and get her way another time.
We're also reinforcing, what, as parents, what we want to do is reinforce the positive behavior. So, for example, indicating that you want more, then you get more milk. If you just squawk at me, play dumb, I don't understand.
Yeah.
What is it? I know that you can tell me, you can communicate with me. What do you want? And you can lead them a little, but yes, I agree that sometimes it's a battle of wills, but it's kind of mind over matter. If you don't mind, it doesn't matter. You're
Absolutely.
like, and also keep in mind that being id-based creatures, I don't know if I should say this, but I'm trying to think of a good way. We don't negotiate with id-based creatures. There's another word, but I don't want to say it. But
yeah, like another way to play dumb. Sometimes my son will be like, he'll hand me his water bottle, or he'll say like, "Mom, here." I go, "Oh, thank you for your water bottle. Like, that's nice." Or if a kid says like milk, I'm like, "Yep, I love milk. I love to drink milk." Like, milk. Oh yeah, I'm really thirsty. I think I'm gonna have some milk. Did you want some milk?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and they nod yes or whatever. Oh yes, I want some milk, because I know that they can say a longer sentence. So that it's kind of fun to play dumb. Like, it really it frustrates the kids sometimes, but at the same time, it's like, oh, okay, that's not the natural way to ask, or it's not the appropriate way to ask when you say milk. It's like the appropriate way to ask is actually making a request using a sentence or a question.
Right.
And it's a natural, I think when you play dumb, it's almost like a natural way to get them to that point, which is
definitely. Well, Jeaneen, this has been a fascinating conversation. I've so enjoyed it. How can people get a hold of you? How can they find your book?
Oh, the easiest way is going to my website. It's playdumbandsabotage.com. There's a link for my book there, and they can also reach out to me if they want to do a virtual or in-person training or have me as a speaker. Be amazing to spread the word. I really think we could decrease the number of kids that need early intervention speech therapy if we had more parent and educator training early on. because there's always going to be those kids like that are on the spectrum or they have an actual delay that need speech therapy. But I would love to be able to address a lot of these normal developing kids that are physically sound, intellectually sound. They're just late talkers.
Yep.
Because these parents are over anticipating.
Definitely.
And this is a book that could help every child, whether they have a disability or not.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's a great resource for parents and educators. And, thank you so much for writing it.
Thank you for having me.
No problem. And I want to remind my audience that if you're ready to begin your epic journey, go to epicbegins.com. And if you live in the San Francisco Bay Area and you would like to be a guest, I have a brand new TV show starting in 2025, and I am looking for guests. As always, remember, epic choices lead to the epic life that you want.
Get your gift copy of the award-winning book Epic Begins with One Step Forward at epicbegins.com. That's a wrap on this episode of Epic Begins with One Step Forward with your host, Zander Sprague, best-selling author, internationally acclaimed public speaker, and licensed professional clinical counselor. To make your next conference or event epic, send an email to Zander at zander@epicbegins.com. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. Remember, epic choices, epic life.